You'll never make anything of yourself just sitting at that computer, my mom mocked for years. Until my brother's fiancée mentioned my name at a conference and the CEO asked if she could meet me. I'm Alex, 32 years old, and I've spent most of my life being the family's black sheep, the one everyone said was wasting time. My story isn't flashy or dramatic at first glance, but it's been years of quiet struggle, simmering resentment, and finally, a chance to flip the script. I want to share how my own mother and brother turned their backs on me, how their toxic attitudes shaped my early adulthood, and how a seemingly small mention at a conference set off a chain reaction that none of them saw coming. Growing up, the family dynamic was as clear-cut as they come. My mom, Linda, was the undisputed queen of the house, and my dad was the silent enabler. My older brother Jason was the perfect son, the golden child who excelled at everything and could do no wrong. And then there was me, the quiet kid who spent hours at the computer, tinkering with code, building simple programs, and dreaming of a life beyond their narrow expectations. From a very young age, my mom made sure I knew I wasn't living up to her standards. Not in a subtle way either. She said things right to my face, in front of guests, family, friends, anyone who'd listen. "Alex is just sitting at that computer again," she'd say, shaking her head with a sigh like it was a disease. "He'll never make anything of himself if he keeps wasting time like that. Maybe if he focused on real work, like Jason, he wouldn't be such a disappointment." My dad rarely spoke up, but I could see the way he glanced away, the way he silently agreed. Jason soaked up the praise, oblivious or maybe just uninterested in the silent war raging under the same roof. School wasn't easy. Jason was the star athlete, the captain of the football team, the one teachers raved about. I was the quiet kid with glasses who struggled to fit in. The rare times I tried to talk about my interests, my parents dismissed them like they were hobbies at best. "You're not going to get anywhere playing on that computer," my mom would say. "You need to learn how to deal with people, like Jason does." Looking back, it was more than just typical sibling rivalry or parental expectations. It was a calculated form of control. My mom thrived on keeping me under her thumb, ensuring I never felt confident enough to break away or succeed on my own terms. When I turned 18, I decided not to follow the traditional college route. Tuition was expensive, and honestly, I didn't see how sitting in a lecture hall was going to teach me what I wanted to know. I started teaching myself to code, spending countless nights learning programming languages, building websites for small businesses, and slowly building a reputation in the local tech community. My mom's reaction? She scoffed. "Playing around with computers isn't a real job. You're just wasting your time and everyone else's." Meanwhile, Jason was finishing up his business degree, fully embraced as the future of the family business, a small but established construction company my parents had run for years. Jason was always the favorite. They bragged about his accomplishments at family gatherings, and I was the punchline in jokes I wasn't even present to hear. By my mid-20s, I had started my own small tech consulting business. Nothing flashy, no million-dollar deals, but enough to pay rent and keep food on the table. I worked from home, often late into the night, building websites, automating processes for local businesses, and quietly building a client list. Of course, none of that mattered to my family. When I'd bring up a new client or a successful project, my mom's eyes would glaze over, and she'd dismiss it with a wave. "That's not a real job, Alex. Jason is out there making something of himself. You're just sitting at that computer all day." The breaking point came when Jason got engaged to Meredith. Meredith wasn't just any fiancée. She was a sharp, ambitious event planner deeply embedded in the tech scene. She organized conferences, networking events, and had connections with some pretty big names in the industry. I thought, maybe, just maybe, this was my chance to finally be seen. I was wrong. Meredith quickly made it clear she didn't think much of me. At one family dinner, loud enough for everyone to hear, she said, "Alex is sweet, but all that computer stuff is just a hobby. It's not a real career. Jason's got a future, but Alex? I don't know." My mom beamed. Exactly what I've been saying for years. I kept quiet, biting my tongue. But inside, I was furious. Then came the conference Meredith was organizing a few months later. It was a major tech summit, and Jason was helping her with logistics. At one of the panels, Meredith mentioned me in passing, a quick comment about a talented, under-the-radar developer helping with some projects. What happened next was unexpected. One of the CEOs in the audience, a woman with a reputation for spotting real talent, asked Meredith afterward if she could meet this Alex. Meredith hesitated but gave out my LinkedIn info. That night, I received a message from the CEO herself. She wanted to talk. The message from the CEO, whose name was Catherine, was straightforward but professional. She introduced herself as the head of a mid-sized software company known for taking chances on unconventional talent, and she expressed genuine interest in my work after Meredith's mention. It felt surreal. After years of being told I wasn't enough, this was the first time someone with real clout wanted to know more about me. I scheduled a video call with Catherine for the next week, and for once, I felt a flicker of hope. What I didn't expect was the ripple effect this small acknowledgement would cause back home. The night I told my mom I had a call with the CEO, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd show some pride. Instead, she laughed. "That's cute, Alex," she said, pouring herself a cup of tea. "Just don't get your hopes up. These people like to pretend to care about underdogs, but at the end of the day, they only want the best pedigree. Jason's connections will get him a real job, not this fantasy of yours." Jason, who was sitting across the table scrolling on his phone, didn't even look up. Meredith smirked and whispered, "Don't embarrass yourself." That's when I realized how deep their disdain ran. They weren't just dismissive, they were cruel. The weeks that followed were a careful dance. Catherine and I talked regularly, discussing projects, my ideas, and how my approach was different. She invited me to submit a proposal for a pilot project her company was planning. I spent late nights perfecting it, driven by a mix of anxiety and determination. Meanwhile, back at home, my family doubled down on their venom. At Jason's bachelor party, a gathering I reluctantly attended, Meredith made a show of questioning my career choices in front of his friends. "Why don't you get a real job?" she asked, loud enough for everyone. "No offense, Alex, but consulting from your bedroom doesn't pay the bills." Someone else laughed nervously, and I said nothing, because any comeback I might have had was drowned out by the chorus of agreement. After that night, I started pulling away from family events. I couldn't stomach the way they all looked at me like I was a joke. I stopped answering calls, stopped showing up, and instead focused everything on my work and Catherine's project. Then, the email came. The project was approved. Catherine wanted me to come to their headquarters for a meeting and to meet the team. I was ecstatic, but also terrified. This was my chance to prove I wasn't the failure they claimed. The chance to step out from their shadows and make something real. When I told my mom, I expected silence. Instead, I got the full storm. "Don't get carried away," she snapped, her voice icy. "You're walking into a place full of people who'll chew you up and spit you out. Just like you've been in this family. Jason is the one with the future, not you." Jason nodded, his expression smug. Meredith leaned in, her voice dripping with condescension. "Maybe if you mess this up, it'll finally be proof you're not cut out for anything." I left that night furious, but I kept my head down. The day of the meeting, I flew out to the city where Catherine's company was based. Walking into the building felt like stepping into a new world. The energy was different from the stale, judgmental atmosphere back home. Here, people were genuinely interested in ideas, innovation, and potential. Catherine greeted me warmly and introduced me to the team. They asked questions, listened intently, and genuinely seemed excited about what I could bring to the table. It was a breath of fresh air. The meeting went well, better than I expected. Catherine later told me that my approach to problem solving and my unique background were assets they wanted to nurture. I returned home with a new sense of purpose, ready to tell my family that I had a real opportunity. But when I walked through the door, the tension was palpable. Jason's fiancée, Meredith, was there with my mom and dad, all gathered around the dining table like a conspiracy. "I heard about your little meeting," Meredith said, eyeing me like I was a bug she was about to squash. "Do you really think you're ready for something like that? People like Catherine don't actually want to help someone like you. They're just being polite." My mom nodded, folding her arms. "This is why you should stick to what you know, whatever that is. You're not part of this family's legacy. You're a mistake." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them I had just met with a CEO who believed in me, who wanted to fund my project, but I held back. Instead, I calmly said, "You can think whatever you want. I'm going to prove you wrong." From that day, things shifted. The family, especially my mom and Meredith, became more hostile. They tried to sabotage me in small, petty ways, spreading rumors that I was unreliable, telling potential clients I was unprofessional, even going as far as hacking a small website I managed to embarrass me. But none of it broke me. Then came the conference Meredith organized, the same one where she mentioned me in passing. At first, I thought she was mocking me. She made the comment about me being a talented, under-the-radar developer with a tone that didn't feel sincere. But that one sentence caught the attention of Catherine, who was in the audience. She asked Meredith afterward if she could meet me. That moment changed everything. Suddenly, the woman who dismissed me in front of the whole family was the one who connected me with the CEO. The irony wasn't lost on me. But here's where things get even more complicated. When the news of my meeting with Catherine leaked back to my family, their reaction was fury masked as concern. My mom accused me of using the family connection through Meredith to get ahead, claiming I was manipulating the situation. Jason called me arrogant and warned me not to get above myself. Meredith, however, took it further. She started making public comments at family gatherings and on social media, questioning my integrity and belittling my accomplishments. It became clear they didn't just dislike me. They feared what I was becoming. After the conference, things at home took a sharp turn for the worse, but it wasn't the kind of chaos you'd expect from a shouting match or a big family blowout. No, my family's version of cruelty was quieter, colder, and far more effective. They turned their weapons on me in subtle ways. Ways that ate away at me from the inside. The kind of slow-burn cruelty that only someone who knows you well can deliver. Meredith was the worst of the lot. If my mom was the queen bee of dismissiveness, Meredith was the hive's sharp sting. She had this knack for cutting remarks disguised as concern. For example, after I landed that first pilot project with Catherine's company, Meredith posted a vague but pointed message on her social media. Some people think overnight success comes easy. Hard work and real connections tell a very different story. It was obviously about me, and of course, the family got involved. At the next family dinner, if you could call it that, it felt like a tribunal. My mom, dad, Jason, and Meredith sat around the table like a jury ready to pass judgment. They each took turns telling me how foolish I was for thinking I could break into the real world without a degree, without the right name, without family backing. You don't know how business works, my mom said flatly. Jason and I have been running the company for years. We have the contacts, the experience. You're chasing dreams that don't pay the bills. Jason leaned back in his chair, smirking. You're lucky to even get the time of day from someone like Catherine. Don't screw this up, or you'll prove everyone right. Meredith chimed in, sweet but venomous. You've never held a proper job, Alex. This whole consulting thing is just a hobby you're deluding yourself about. I kept my composure, but inside, I was boiling. For years, they belittled every step I took, dismissed every success as luck or a fluke, and now they were ganging up on me like this was some game they were guaranteed to win. But here's the thing. They didn't realize how much their cruelty fueled me. That night, after they all left, I sat alone in my small apartment, surrounded by code, notes, and half-finished projects. I thought about how different my life could have been if they'd just supported me. But then I realized something else. I was building something on my own terms. Something they could never understand or control. The pilot project with Catherine's company moved forward, and I worked harder than ever. I poured every ounce of effort into it, sometimes working 20-hour days, refining code, solving problems, and presenting updates. Catherine checked in regularly, impressed with the progress and the creative solutions I was bringing. One afternoon, about 3 months into the project, Catherine called me with an offer I never expected. We want to bring you on as a consultant for a bigger initiative, she said. Your work is exactly what we need to push the company forward. I was stunned. This wasn't just a project anymore. It was a stepping stone to something much bigger. I wanted to shout it from the rooftops, but I didn't. I knew what would happen if I told my family. Sure enough, when I finally mentioned it at the next family gathering, more out of a need to share than to prove anything, the reaction was icy. Don't get ahead of yourself, my mom said sharply. You're still a kid playing at grown-up games. Jason has been managing real projects for years. Jason nodded, arms crossed. This is a nice fantasy, Alex, but don't expect us to treat you like you've suddenly become important. Meredith was smug. You'll probably mess it up anyway. Just wait. That was when I realized they were actively rooting for me to fail. It wasn't just dismissiveness anymore, it was sabotage. And sabotage came in all forms. Around that time, I noticed strange things happening with my clients. Emails went unanswered, calls were missed, and projects got delayed. When I looked deeper, I found out that someone had been spreading rumors, false claims that I was unreliable, disorganized, and difficult to work with. I had my suspicions. Meredith was connected to a lot of people in the local business scene, and I had every reason to believe she was behind it. But I didn't have proof. The final straw came during a regional tech networking event. I'd been invited as a guest speaker, an opportunity I'd worked hard to secure thanks to Catherine's recommendation. I was supposed to share my story, talk about innovation in small business tech consulting. But when I got there, I realized something was wrong. The organizer, someone I had dealt with before, greeted me coldly and then pulled me aside. "We've had some complaints about you," he said quietly. "People say you're not professional, that you don't deliver on promises. I'm sorry, but I can't let you speak today." I was crushed. It was humiliating. I left the event early, feeling like I was back at square one. When I confronted my family, they acted innocent. "Maybe you need to try harder," my mom said, her tone patronizing. "People don't just hand out opportunities. Jason works for them." Meredith smiled, her eyes shining with satisfaction. "Maybe this is your sign to quit while you're ahead." But I didn't quit. If anything, their attacks made me more determined. I started documenting everything: the emails, the calls, the interactions. I wanted to build a case, not just for myself, but to expose their manipulation if it ever came to that. And then came the conference Meredith organized. I hadn't planned to attend. I figured I'd stay away to avoid their venom, but I was there in spirit, through Meredith's offhand comment during one of the panels. She mentioned me briefly, in a way that felt like a joke, but it caught the attention of Catherine. That's when the CEO asked Meredith afterward if she could meet me. I got the invitation, and suddenly, the small world I'd been building felt like it was about to explode. But my family's reaction was far from supportive. When they found out, my mom called me one afternoon. "Alex, this is getting out of hand," she said, voice tight. "You're embarrassing the family. Jason's fiancé told me some people are talking. You need to stop this nonsense before it ruins everything." I stood my ground. "This is my life," I said. "I'm not going to let you or anyone else decide what I'm worth." She sighed, almost like she was pitying me. "You don't understand. This family is all we have. You don't belong here." I hung up, knowing the war was just beginning. It took a long time for me to realize that fighting fire with fire wasn't the way I wanted to go. At first, the thought of getting back at them, the family that had spent years trying to tear me down, felt like the only way to reclaim some dignity. But I didn't want petty drama or childish spite. I wanted something that would outsmart them, something that would force them to see me not as a failure or a joke, but as someone who had quietly built an empire without their help. The first step was gathering evidence. For months, I had been quietly saving emails, texts, social media posts, and snippets of conversations that showed Meredith and my parents deliberately sabotaging me. It was tedious and draining, but I needed proof. Proof that their concern was just a mask for jealousy and spite. I started small. When Meredith's smear campaign cost me that speaking gig, I found a way to get back in the organizer's good graces by quietly fixing the mess she'd made. I offered to consult on a project the organizer's company was struggling with, without telling my family or Meredith. The project went smoothly, and soon the organizer was one of my biggest supporters. It was a quiet win, but a win nonetheless. Meanwhile, Catherine had become more than just a CEO I worked with. She was a mentor and an ally. She believed in me when no one else did. One day, during a lunch meeting, she said something that stuck with me. "You have the kind of talent that doesn't need a spotlight to shine," she said. "You're building something real, something lasting. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Her words gave me strength. But I knew I couldn't just focus on work. I needed to protect myself from my family's next moves. So I started digging into their affairs. Jason's little business empire wasn't as impressive as they made it out to be. In fact, it was riddled with shady deals, questionable loans, and a string of failures they tried to cover up. My mom's legacy was mostly a front, built on inherited money and favoritism rather than actual talent or effort. I spent months quietly pulling public records, tracking financial documents, and connecting the dots. The more I uncovered, the more I realized just how fragile their facade was. One afternoon, after piecing together enough evidence, I reached out to a trusted lawyer who specialized in corporate fraud. I shared what I'd found and asked for advice on how to protect myself and potentially expose their misconduct. The lawyer warned me to tread carefully. Families like yours don't take kindly to being exposed. But if you have proof, you have leverage. That leverage became the foundation of my plan. I didn't want to just fight them on their terms. I wanted to take the one thing they valued most, the company, and show them what happens when the underdog becomes the owner. So I started making quiet moves. I reached out to some of the company's creditors and suppliers, subtly warning them about the financial instability I'd uncovered. I contacted a few key investors with documents proving mismanagement and fraud. At the same time, I ramped up my own business. With Catherine's backing, I secured new clients, expanded my team, and developed cutting-edge software solutions that were starting to catch attention in the industry. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for, the annual shareholders meeting of the family company. Jason and my parents were expecting an easy gathering, a time to pat themselves on the back and remind everyone why they were in charge. What they didn't expect was me showing up with a legal team, a stack of documents, and the support of several key shareholders who had been quietly convinced to back me. The room was filled with tension as I laid out the evidence of financial mismanagement, conflict of interest, and outright deception. I detailed how Jason had been funneling company funds into his personal ventures, how my mom had been approving questionable contracts to friends without oversight, and how Meredith's attempts to sabotage me were part of a pattern of toxic behavior that was harming the company's reputation. There was a stunned silence. Then, my mom's face turned pale, Jason's jaw tightened, and Meredith looked as if she wanted to disappear. I calmly presented a proposal. I was offering to buy out the family's shares. I had the financial backing to take control of the company and lead it in a new direction, away from their mismanagement and entitlement. Jason scoffed. "You don't have the experience. You're just some consultant." I smiled. Experience isn't just about time spent. It's about results. And I have those. The shareholders voted. By a narrow margin, they agreed to my proposal. As I signed the papers, I felt a wave of satisfaction, not just because I was taking over the company, but because I had done it on my terms, quietly, without the drama they expected. But the fallout was immediate and brutal. At the next family gathering, the atmosphere was electric. My mom accused me of betrayal. Jason threatened legal action, and Meredith publicly humiliated me in front of relatives, calling me a greedy opportunist who had stolen the family legacy. I stood my ground. This family legacy wasn't built on integrity, I said. It was built on manipulation, lies, and fear. I'm here to change that. The room erupted in chaos, but I walked out knowing I'd won the battle. After that explosive shareholders meeting, things never went back to normal. Except, there was no normal anymore. At least, not the kind of normal I'd known growing up. The family fractured in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. My mom retreated from public view almost immediately. Gone were the confident, sharp-tongued woman who belittled me over the years. Instead, I heard whispers from distant relatives about how she spent her days locked away in her room, refusing to speak to anyone outside a few loyal friends. Her pride had been shattered, and the humiliation was something she never quite recovered from. Jason, on the other hand, fought dirty. When he realized that legal avenues to reclaim the company were futile, he started undermining me in every other way possible. He used his remaining influence to sabotage client contracts, spread vicious rumors about my unethical business practices, and even tried to poach key team members with promises of future family control. But by then, I was several steps ahead. I'd hired top legal counsel and tightened internal security. Every attempt Jason made to disrupt the business was met with swift, professional pushback. Suppliers and clients who had once wavered because of his rumors now saw his desperation clearly, and many switched loyalties entirely. Meredith, perhaps the worst of all, was cut out completely. She wasn't just sidelined. She became a cautionary tale. Her toxic behavior, attempts at sabotage, and manipulation of family drama eventually cost her more than just a place in the company. She alienated nearly everyone she knew, and within months, she was essentially isolated. The relatives who once fawned over her started distancing themselves once they realized her ambition came with a sharp edge aimed at family, not just business rivals. As for me, the company thrived. The culture shifted from the old guard's entitlement and backroom dealings to a new focus on innovation, transparency, and genuine client relationships. Revenues increased steadily, and the reputation that had been damaged by years of toxic management slowly began to rebuild. The people who had doubted me, the extended family, some friends, even myself at times, started to see the truth. I wasn't just that kid sitting at the computer, nor was I some naive dreamer. I was a leader, a strategist, and someone who had turned years of hardship into motivation. Family gatherings became non-existent. Invitations stopped coming. I wasn't sad about it. I realized that some family ties are more like chains, heavy, restrictive, and painful to bear. I never forgave them. Why should I? Forgiveness implies they deserved a second chance, that they might change. They didn't. They doubled down on their entitlement and bitterness, which only proved how right I'd been to build my life apart from their shadow. In the end, my family remained stuck in their own cycle of dysfunction and denial, unable or unwilling to see beyond their own selfishness. They lost the company, their reputation, and most importantly, the respect of everyone who mattered. I gained something far more valuable: independence, respect, and a future I built with my own hands, quietly, steadily, and with a clear mind. So, if there's a takeaway here, it's this: sometimes the loudest voices in your life are the ones trying to keep you down. But the strongest victories come from patience, hard work, and knowing when to walk away from the people who don't deserve you. And for anyone wondering what happened to that kid at the computer, well, I'm the one now calling the shots.